Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel not through battles or conquests, but through calm calculations. We're heading to the heart of the Aztec world, not to see warriors or priests calling out from temples, but to sit beside the calendar makers, the ones who moved time forward, one quiet glyph at a time. You probably won't survive this unless you're uniquely adapted to soothing geometry, gentle stargazing, and the feeling of watching someone count without saying a word. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights. Maybe set a soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of Tenochtitlan, not the market, not the causeways, but a small courtyard near the Kalmakacs, a school for the sons of nobles. There's no crowd here, just slow footsteps, the rustle of woven fabric, and the dry brushing sound of stone being shaped by steady hands. In front of you, a flat stone is being carved, not quickly, not with dramatic hammering. Each groove is made with care. One line, then pause, then another. The man shaping it doesn't look up. He doesn't need to. He knows the pattern by memory, the same way someone might know a lullaby, because this is a calendar stone, and every line matters. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Aztec calendar was made up of two primary cycles, the Tonopahwali, a 260-day ritual calendar, and the Xiuhpahwali, a 365-day solar calendar. These two systems turned like interlocking gears, combining to form a repeating 52-year cycle known as a bundle. Every day had meaning, not just a date, but a character, a name, a tone. The role of keeping track of all this belonged to trained calendar priests, or tonal puke, who maintained sacred timing through quiet precision. You sit now on a low bench nearby. The courtyard is shaded. The smell of smoothed stone and sun-warmed earth drifts on the air. The calendar maker continues his work, pausing now and then to dust away debris with a feather. He doesn't speak, but he's telling time all the same. Fringe detail some calendar stones, especially those used in small temple observatories, were carved not all at once, but gradually over months. Makers would inscribe a few glyphs at a time, then wait for specific stars or sun positions before continuing. It wasn't superstition, it was alignment. The stone had to match the sky. You glance at a wall nearby. Painted across it are two interlocking wheels, one with 13 notches, the other with 20. These represent the days of the Tonopahwali. Each day named Jaguar, Wind, House, Lizard is part of a cycle. Time doesn't march here, it turns. Here's your scholarly uncertainty. Why did the Aztecs use a 260-day ritual calendar in the first place? No one's entirely sure. Some suggest it matches the human gestation cycle. Others think it was adapted from older Mesoamerican cultures for divination purposes. What's clear is that it was steady, sacred, and trusted. Time here wasn't arbitrary. It was listened to. This is your journey-style immersion. You lean back against the wall, the sun warm through your tunic. The rhythm of carving continues. A slow scrape, a brush of the feather, a small cup of water sipped between tasks. You feel no need to speak. The calendar speaks through its form. The carver glances up once, not at you, but at the shadow cast by the central pillar of the courtyard. It has moved slightly. He nods, not in urgency, just in confirmation. The next glyph will be cut now, not because the schedule says so, but because the shadow does. And so, time continues, softly, with stone and sky. The courtyard is quieter now, not because the work has stopped, but because the sound of carving has receded into the rhythm of the day. You can barely hear it anymore. It's like breath there, but no longer separate from everything else. Across the square, a student in a woven tunic kneels beside a painted board. He traces symbols with a wooden stylus, not writing exactly, but reciting through movement. His lips don't move, but his hand does, looping, tapping, pausing. He's studying time, and he's not alone. Here's your mainstream historical fact: the Aztec understanding of time was built on two parallel calendars. One was the Tanalpahuali, the 260-day sacred calendar made of 20 repeating day signs and a rotating set of 13 numbers. The other was the Shupahuali, a 365-day solar calendar divided into 18 months of 20 days each, plus 5 empty days considered spiritually dangerous. These two calendars cycled together, like gears, aligning every 52 years to create a sacred reset. You walk closer to the student. The painted board before him is worn smooth, not from neglect, but from use, along the edges. 20 glyphs curve in a soft circle: crocodile, wind, house, lizard, and so on, each one drawn not for beauty, but for function. Time here is lived through images, not numerals, no ticking hands, no dates, just a looping sequence of days that speak in symbols. Fringe details: scholars believe the 260-day calendar may have been used not just for ritual, but for naming infants were often named after the day sign on which they were born. A child born on the day of a cattle reed might grow to be a mediator, a pathfinder. The calendar wasn't a clock, it was an identity. You glance over the student's shoulder. He's following the sequence slowly. 1 wind, 2 house, 3 lizard. His stylus taps softly every 13th glyph, resetting the number cycle, but not the day signs. The result: a beautifully complex weave, where each day is unique, yet always familiar. Here's your scholarly uncertainty: why exactly 260 days, as mentioned earlier? Some theories link it to the human gestation period. Others point to astronomical cycles, like the zenithal sun path in Mesoamerica. But what's most remarkable is not just the length, but the way it functioned as a tool for prediction, ritual planning, and personal meaning. The calendar shaped decisions, not deadlines. You sit down nearby. The stone is warm beneath you. The air has stilled. Even the birds seem to have paused. This is your journey-style moment. The student finishes a cycle and quietly begins again. He doesn't rush. He doesn't check his work against a clock. Time isn't something he's racing. It's something he's joining. Another figure, an older priest, approaches, places a palm on the student's shoulder, and nods, not as correction, as continuation. The student places his stylus aside and begins arranging colored stones across a square cloth. A game? No. A ritual. Each stone matches a day sign. He's mapping weeks, not to count them, but to listen to their shape. You notice the sun has shifted. The shadows have moved. The carver in the courtyard has stopped, hands resting in his lap, not because he's tired, because the day has reached its correct angle. And here, that's enough. No bells, No rush, just cycles and silence. The courtyard is almost empty now, though the sense of purpose hasn't faded. The carver has tucked away his tools. The student with the day signs has left his cloth undisturbed, as if the stones will keep turning the calendar forward on their own. You step into a covered hallway, dim and cool. The walls are painted not with scenes of battle or kings, but with spirals, symbols, and quiet maps of time. Here, no one speaks. The hallway isn't a corridor, it's a classroom. This is where the calendar priests train. Here's your mainstream historical fact in Aztec society. Timekeeping was the sacred domain of trained priests known as tonalpukoi daykeepers. These men weren't just religious officials, they were mathematicians, astronomers, and diviners responsible for reading the calendar, interpreting its omens, and advising leaders on the correct timing of everything from harvests to ceremonies to wars. Their training took years. Their calculations were done entirely without numbers, as we know them, using painted codices, spatial memory, and an intimate understanding of cycles. You pause beside a small platform where one of the priests sits cross-legged, gently painting a sheet of bark paper. He uses a fine brush, no bigger than a fingertip, and dips it into a pot of pigment made from crushed cochineal. The red it produces is soft, almost sleepy. He's painting time. Fringe detail Aztec calendar codices weren't meant to be read linearly. They unfolded accordion style and were read slowly, from panel to panel, by someone trained to follow the interlacing of day signs, number symbols, and celestial glyphs. Some codices were so delicate that only 2 or 3 people were ever allowed to handle them. Their wisdom was preserved not in speed, but in slowness. Here's your scholarly uncertainty. How were these complex calculations memorized and passed down? We still don't fully know. There were no abacuses, no written numbers, only glyphs, movement, and repetition. Some scholars suggest that rhythmic chant and physical ritual helped fix sequences in memory. Others point to the training of the Kalmakak, the temple schools where boys practiced day counting alongside ceremonial gestures, grounding time in both mind and body. You sit beside a painted wall where 20 day signs are arranged in a gentle arc. A second arc of numbers runs above them 1 to 13, then starting again. The priest finishes a glyph, lifts his brush, and waits. Not because he's unsure, because the rhythm requires it. This is your journey-style immersion. You press your back against the cool stone and trace one of the signs with your eyes. It's the glyph for Kali House, a steady symbol, one of protection. Today might be 8 Kali, or maybe 11 Ocelot Jaguar. It doesn't matter. You're not marking time. You're sitting inside it. The priest paints another line. You hear the bristles whisper over the paper. He breathes deeply. So do you. The hallway remains quiet, but the silence is not empty. It's full of dates you cannot rush, days that will arrive when they choose. The calendar is not a schedule here. It's a presence, as in tonight. It welcomes you without requiring anything in return. The hallway opens onto a terrace, shaded by a wide overhang of woven reeds. You step into it slowly. The air feels different here, lighter, but still warm, as if the sun has agreed to step aside without entirely disappearing. Below, the temple courtyard continues, but at a slower pace. A pair of priests walk in silence. One carries a painted scroll tucked under his arm. The other holds a polished obsidian disc, not for ceremony, but for watching light. This is where time is balanced, not with clocks, with shadows. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Aztec calendar divided the 365-day solar year into 18 months of 20 days each, plus 5 nameless days. These 20-day units were called veintenas, and each had its own festival, deities, and seasonal meaning, together with the 260-day Tonalpohualli. They formed a complex, interlocking structure used to schedule rituals, planting, taxes, and even naming children. This wasn't abstract calculation. It was practical structure, applied with sacred patience. You sit on the edge of the terrace. Below, the courtyard has been marked with stones, white ones in a curved line, dark ones in a straight one. These aren't decorations, they're calibrations, markers of solstice and equinox, of midday sun, of shadows that fall in just the right place, only once a year. Fringe detail in some temples. Priests used simple gnomons, upright poles or carved notches in walls, to track the sun's position throughout the year. These weren't exact like modern instruments, but they didn't need to be. A few minutes off didn't break the ritual. What mattered was harmony when the light returned to the right spot. The day had arrived. One priest kneels now, aligning the obsidian disc toward a shaft of light passing through a carved slit in the wall. He doesn't speak. The other priest adjusts a shadow marker, a small stick with a glyph on top. When the shadow falls just right, they nod to each other. Nothing is written down. Nothing needs to be. Here's your scholarly uncertainty. How much astronomical knowledge did the Aztecs possess? And how did they develop it? Some argue their observations were empirical, based on generations of sky watching. Others believe they inherited astronomical systems from earlier civilizations like the Maya and Olmec, refining them into something uniquely practical and symbolic. What's clear is that their accuracy was consistent and their patience remarkable. This is your journey-style immersion. The priest offers you a seat beside the disc. You don't touch it. You don't need to. You simply watch as the sunlight shifts across its surface, like time exhaling. A shadow crosses the courtyard slowly. You feel its arrival, not with urgency, but with recognition. The light moves. A feather flutters down from the terrace roof. A young initiate sweeps the stones gently back into place after the sun passes them. No bells, no hour strikes. And yet, something important has occurred. A moment has been measured. You glance upward. The sun sits just shy of center. A line of white chalk on the terrace marks where it will land next week. No one rushes to meet it. The priests simply wait, because in this world, time doesn't push forward. It aligns, and when it does, everything else softens around it. The sun has dipped lower now, pulling soft shadows from the corners of buildings. You leave the terrace and descend a set of worn stone steps, each one slightly rounded by centuries of careful feet. At the base, another courtyard opens, and at its center rests something massive, a circular stone, taller than you, carved edge to edge with intricate symbols, spirals, rays, faces, glyphs set like teeth around a jaw of time. But it doesn't shout, it waits. This is the Piedra del Sol, often called the Aztec Sunstone, and it was never meant to be rushed. Here's your mainstream historical fact: the Piedra del Sol, or Sunstone, was carved in the late 15th century, likely during the reign of Moctezuma II, though commonly mistaken for a calendar. The stone is more accurately a cosmological diagram, a visual map of Aztec time, myth, and sacred cycles. At its center, the face of the sun god Tonatiuh, surrounded by symbols representing past eras, day signs, and celestial movements. It's not a schedule, it's a worldview, rendered in quiet stone. You circle it slowly. The grooves are deep and deliberate. No surface is flat, yet nothing feels chaotic. Each mark belongs. Each glyph rests precisely where it should be. It's not decorative, it's functional, a kind of celestial conversation encoded in symbols. Fringe details: some scholars believe that the outer ring of the sunstone aligns with the 20-day signs of the Tonalpohualli. Each glyph carved not only to mark time, but to hold it. The stone may have been laid flat originally, allowing priests to use it with sunlight, shadow, and ritual powders to track time's movement in real space. No mechanisms, just alignment. You pause beside the central glyph, Tonatiuh's wide face. He doesn't smile. He doesn't threaten. He looks out with calm vigilance, like someone who has seen many seasons and is neither surprised nor disturbed by what they bring. Here's your scholarly uncertainty: was the sunstone used as a functioning timepiece, or as symbolic art? Debate continues. Some argue it tracked eclipses or ritual days. Others believe it was purely commemorative. But even if it didn't measure time in a modern sense, it held it with a precision that came from belief, not machinery. This is your journey-style immersion. You sit at the edge of the stone. The last sliver of sunlight touches its surface. For a moment, the glyphs glow softly, red, gold, shadowed in the grooves. You run your fingers just above the surface, not touching, just hovering. The stone doesn't move, but the day does. A priest approaches, not to speak, but to place a folded cloth on the eastern edge. Inside it, maize, a few cacao beans, a single feather, not an offering for favor, a gesture of respect. You do the same, removing a pebble from your pocket, one you picked up earlier in the garden path. You set it near the glyph for Malinali grass. It isn't loud, it doesn't glow, but it fits. The stone rests, the sun drops lower, the light retracts like a slow breath, and you, seated beside the measure of myth and sky, realize this isn't a countdown, it's a circle, and you've joined it. The light has shifted again, soft, indirect, the kind of light that gently leaves without anyone needing to say goodbye. You walk away from the sunstone slowly, each step accompanied by the faint hush of sand underfoot. The noise of the city, what little of it ever reached this far, has faded. What remains now is something quieter. A courtyard painted with time. You cross into a shaded room where walls are lined with folded bark paper books, codices. They're not stored in shelves. They rest on platforms of smooth wood and woven mats. Some lie open, mid-fold, revealing pages filled with looping red and black lines, animal symbols, hands, stars, spirals. Time doesn't live in these books. It flows through them. Here's your mainstream historical fact: unlike Western calendars that mark time with written numbers and boxes, the Aztecs recorded dates and sacred days through pictorial codices. These accordion-folded books captured day signs, festivals, genealogies, and astronomical cycles in layers of image and glyph. They were read by trained scribes, calendar priests, who understood how to follow the interplay of symbols and numbers without ever turning a page too quickly. You sit beside one open codex now. A priest is gently retouching the edge of a day sign with a brush made of agave fibers. The ink smells faintly of smoke and crushed flowers. He doesn't look up. His entire posture is devoted to steadiness. Fringe detail, these books weren't illuminated with gold or silver, but with color made from nature red from cochineal insects, blue from azurite, black from soot and bone. Each pigment had its own ritual significance. Some were ground fresh for each session, others were stored for years, allowed to ferment into deeper hues. Here's your scholarly uncertainty. How were these codices used in day-to-day life? While some scholars believe they served strictly as ritual guides, others argue they were also teaching tools, handed down from priest to pupil, used in quiet study and slow recitation. Their complexity suggests deep memorization, patient repetition, and collaborative interpretation. No margins, no page numbers, just turning. The priest finishes his line and closes the book halfway, not to conceal it, but to signal a pause. A page doesn't need to be finished for time to continue. This is your journey-style immersion. You're handed another codex. It's light, faintly warm from the room. You unfold it slowly. It does not pull you forward. It invites you inward. You find yourself tracing the flow of symbols. 5 is serpent, 6, death, 7, deer. You do not know what they mean, not fully, but you can feel the rhythm. Every page a breath, every glyph a heartbeat. A breeze stirs the cloth canopy overhead. You close the codex, careful not to press the folds. The priest nods once, not because you've done it correctly, but because you've done it gently. Here, that's what matters. The codices are not for conquering knowledge. They are for dwelling in it. Outside the codex room, the light has dimmed into blue, not quite night, not quite day. Just that soft in-between where outlines blur and the sky forgets what it was doing. You move along a corridor where torchlight flickers against adobe walls, revealing faint murals, traces of red jaguars, curled flames, and stars drawn like tiny open hands. And in the courtyard ahead, under the open sky, a group has gathered, not for prayer, for painting. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Aztec calendar knowledge wasn't confined to carved stone and bark paper books. It was also passed down through painting, not just as decoration, but as documentation. Scribes known as talaquiloque, literally. Those who paint played a vital role in recording calendar cycles. These were artists trained not in self-expression, but in structured clarity. Their work preserved festivals, agricultural seasons, planetary movements, and divine rhythms, painted with purpose. You approach the group now. They sit cross-legged on woven mats, each with a smooth board in their lap, a small bowl of pigment beside them, and brushes crafted from thin reeds and rabbit fur. No one speaks, not because they can't, but because the act of painting time requires full attention. Fringe detail pigments were not only color, but meaning. Red for bloodlines and sun, black for night and underworld, yellow for maize, blue for sky and sacrifice. These were not chosen on a whim. They were prepared carefully, sometimes with prayers whispered as the stone was ground or the brush dipped. One painter is working on a depiction of one flint, a day sign associated with clarity, judgment, and precision. His hand moves steadily, tracing sharp triangles around the glyph's edge. But he doesn't rush. He pauses often, looks up at the sky, waits for something. You realize he's watching for light, the angle, the reflection, the moment when the glyph catches just enough brightness to be true. Here's your scholarly uncertainty. Did the act of painting day signs serve a meditative purpose for the scribes themselves? Some suggest that the repetition of symbols over and over in codices, murals, and tribute records acted like prayer. Others believe it was mnemonic, a way to fix the calendar in the mind through the hand. But many now agree that painting time was more than illustration. It was participation. You're offered a small board, blank and smooth, a bowl of ochre, a brush. You hesitate, the others continue without glancing over. There is no pressure, only process. This is your journey-style immersion. You dip the brush. You trace a single curve. It wobbles. You do not correct it. Because here, time isn't precise. It's present. The glyph you're painting will not be judged. It will be remembered as something you joined. The person beside you hums softly, a rhythm with no beginning. One brushstroke, a breath. Another brushstroke, a pause. The board in your lap begins to glow faintly with meaning, not because the symbol is correct, but because you were with it as it appeared. A soft chime sounds across the courtyard. Two small bells struck gently, not to end the session, to mark the moment. Everyone lowers their brushes. The painting is never finished. It simply stops when the time says, "Thank you." The courtyard empties slowly, not because a bell rang, not because a voice commanded, just because the light has changed, and the day has tilted into a gentler hour. You rise from your mat and walk toward the northern edge of the complex, where stone steps lead up into a temple chamber, not grand, not crowded, just tall enough to let in starlight through narrow slits in the ceiling. This is where the calendar pauses and adjusts. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Although the Aztec calendars followed fixed sacred cycles, the priests were also keen observers of the stars and solar alignments. They made careful seasonal adjustments, not by rewriting the calendar, but by reading the sky. The solstices and equinoxes were critical markers. When a solar event aligned with a sacred day, it was interpreted not as coincidence, but as confirmation. And when things drifted out of sync, ceremonies were held not to correct, but to realign human attention with cosmic rhythm. You step into the chamber. The floor is marked with a circle of white chalk, inside of which rests a single upright stick, its shadow barely visible in the fading light. This isn't a clock. It's a conversation with the sun, fringe detail during equinox ceremonies. Priests would gather in silence around gnomons like this one, watching the midday sun cast a shadow that aligned, if all was well, with a carved groove in the stone floor. No chanting, no signal, just observation. And when the line matched, they would simply nod, scatter maize flour, and walk away. You approach the circle. The shadow is faint now, falling slightly wide of the groove. A priest nearby, his face lined with age, his hands stained with blue pigment, places a small ceramic bowl of water beside the shadow line. The surface trembles. He waits. So do you. Here's your scholarly uncertainty. How did the Aztecs balance the fixed ritual days of the Tonopahwali with the natural drift of the solar year? Some argue that minor adjustments were made quietly, rituals delayed by a day, or observed in doubled silence to compensate. Others believe the two calendars were never meant to align perfectly. The tension between them was part of the system, a built-in reminder that divine time and natural time, though intertwined, are never exactly the same. The priest leans in. The water in the bowl has stilled. The shadow now brushes its edge. He marks the stone with a black dot, not to change anything, just to note we are slightly behind. Then he blows gently on the surface of the water. The shadow shifts, and so the cycle continues. This is your journey style immersion. You kneel beside the priest. He hands you a pinch of maize flour. You scatter it without words, without instruction. The grain falls into the groove on the floor. The act isn't meant to please a god or fix a mistake. It's meant to notice, and in noticing, you've honored the day. Above, through the slit in the ceiling, a single star appears. It's faint, alone, but not lost. It's exactly where it's meant to be, just slightly early. And that, tonight, is sacred. You step back outside into the cool hush of early night. The torches have been left unlit. They're not needed. The moon is enough. It hangs low and round, casting long shadows across the smooth stone paths, like ink spilled slowly across parchment. The temple complex behind you still breathes with silence. People are inside, preparing tomorrow's pigments, all laying out folded codices. But here, under the stars, time has another texture, because to the Aztecs, time was never separate from the cosmos. It was a balance. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Aztec calendar system was not only mathematical, it was cosmological. The alignment of rituals, festivals, and daily activities with celestial phenomena was key to maintaining balance between the human world Tlalpacpac and the divine One Topan. Time was not just for organizing events, it was a structure for sustaining cosmic harmony. A misaligned ceremony wasn't just inconvenient, it was spiritually destabilizing. You walk slowly across a small ceremonial platform set with circular stone tiles. A priest stands nearby, watching the sky, not seeking anything, just observing. Above him, Orion rises, tilted sideways. Beside it, the dark gap in the Milky Way the Aztecs knew as the Itzpapalotl's cleft, the obsidian-winged butterfly goddess's path through the heavens. Fringe detail Aztec priests tracked certain stars, especially Venus and the Pleiades, as markers for ritual timing. The heliacal rising of Venus, its first appearance at dawn, signaled important transitions in the calendar cycle. The stars were not decorative. They were guides, measured patiently, night after night, often from the tops of temple pyramids or from quiet fields far beyond city light. You glance up now and find yourself not scanning the stars, but waiting with them. The sky doesn't perform, it simply remains. Here's your scholarly uncertainty. Were these observations tied to fixed ritual dates, or did they occasionally override them? Some argue that when a celestial event conflicted with a calendar day, the stars' timing took precedence. Others believe both were honored in layered ceremonies, reminders that time could stretch in more than one direction at once. The balance wasn't perfection, it was participation. This is your journey-style immersion. You sit beside the priest. He does not speak. He simply points, not urgently, toward a specific star just cresting the horizon. You don't know its name, but you don't need to. You acknowledge it. It acknowledges nothing in return, and that's enough. A gentle breeze moves through the grass nearby, somewhere beyond the courtyard wall. A reed flute plays a slow, even scale. It's not performance, it's rhythm, a reflection of the skies turning. The priest beside you kneels and traces a symbol in the dust with his finger, 4 lines around a center point. It's not a word, it's balance. Not everything needs to be adjusted. Some things need only to be witnessed. You lie back, head resting on your folded arms. The stone beneath you holds the day's warmth. The stars above you move, not fast, not slow, just enough. The stars have gathered now, not clustered, but calmly arranged. You notice they don't compete. They don't blink for attention. They just take their places, one by one, like careful glyphs in a sky-sized codex. You sit near a circular stone ring, half buried at the edge of a ceremonial plaza. It's not part of the temple's main axis. It was placed here for something smaller, something softer. This is where rest days and feast days were recorded, not to celebrate effort, but to preserve pause. Here's your mainstream historical fact woven into the Aztec calendar were both feast days and ritual intervals of rest. Some were dedicated to gods, others honored agricultural milestones, like the first sprouting of maize or the beginning of rain season. These weren't days off in the modern sense, but structured moments where daily labor stopped. Temples held ceremonies, fields were left alone, markets fell quiet. Not every pause was joyful. Some were silent days, like the 5 nameless days at year's end, meant for caution, stillness, and reflection. You run your hand over the stone ring. Its surface is marked not with words, but with a repeated pattern of dots and spirals. You count 20 dots, then a space, another 20, another space. These may have been markers for Ventinas, the 20-day months of the solar calendar, punctuated by specific feasts or ritual weights. Fringe detail in some districts. Communities used reed mats and colored stones to physically map out the year, arranging the 20-day months on the ground. Days of rest were marked with feathers or small bells. Children were taught to walk the pattern slowly, stepping gently from one day to the next, pausing where the feathers lay. It wasn't just a lesson in time, it was a rehearsal in stillness. You watch as a pair of young initiates enter the plaza, each carrying a bowl of white corn. They walk slowly around the ring, stopping at each group of 20, placing a single kernel on the stone. No rush, no chant, just breath and grain. Here's your scholarly uncertainty: were these rest days rigidly enforced or culturally guided? Some records suggest strict observance and no fire lit, no tools handled. Others hint at flexible interpretation, where the true observance was intention, not inactivity. Either way, the message was clear. Time must include pauses, not breaks, balances. This is your journey-style immersion. You take a kernel of corn from a small bowl left nearby. It's warm from someone else's hands. You place it gently into a groove along the stone ring. No meaning attached, just placement. You sit back. A priest nearby exhales slowly, not a sigh, a closing breath. Then he places a woven cloth over the stone, covering the ring as if tucking it in. The plaza falls silent, and you realize time here is made not by moving forward, but by knowing when to stop. Not permanently, just long enough. Long enough to hear the sky, long enough to feel the field wait, long enough to rest between the turnings. You walk again, slowly now, as if the path beneath you has started to stretch time on your behalf. There are fewer people in the complex, fewer lights, just one or two flickers of motion as someone carries a basket of cochineal pigment or folds up a mat. The work isn't over, but it's easing. You reach a stone platform overlooking a wide open space, a viewing field, flat, unplanted, ringed with smoothed boulders that serve as seats. This wasn't built for labor or ceremony. This was built for observation. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Aztec priests tracked celestial movements with extraordinary attention. The stars were not decorative. They were partners in scheduling sacred rituals. Some temples were designed with roof slits aligned to solstice points. Others used platforms, simple, open, grounded, where priests sat for hours, sometimes entire nights, recording the movement of constellations and planets, especially Venus, the Pleiades, and the patterns of eclipses. You sit down on one of the warm boulders. The sky above you is clear, deep, and generous. The stars are where they're supposed to be. You find Orion again. Then a cluster of faint glimmers, the Pleiades, almost trembling at the edge of visibility. Fringe detail one of the most sacred celestial events in the Aztec calendar was the reappearance of the Pleiades at midnight on the night the 52-year calendar cycle ended. Priests would wait, sometimes in silence, sometimes with tightly held breath, for the stars to rise. Their appearance meant the world would continue. If they failed to appear, it was said the sun might never rise again, but the stars never failed. A priest sits a few stones away, unrolling a scroll that glows faintly in the moonlight. He does not read it. He compares it to the sky. Here's your scholarly uncertainty. How precise were Aztec stellar records? Scholars debate this. While their tracking of Venus was remarkably accurate, some records suggest that broader constellational knowledge was symbolic rather than numerical. Others argue that much has simply been lost, that knowledge passed orally was never transcribed in the ways we recognize. What remains is an unmistakable pattern of patience, repetition, and deep respect. You watch now as a younger initiate approaches with a bowl of river pebbles. He sets them out slowly, one for each visible star in a rising constellation. No labels, just placement. This is your journey-style immersion. The priest gestures for you to add a pebble. You take one from the bowl. It's cool, round, silent. You don't know the name of the star you're honoring, but you don't need to. You place the pebble where the others have made space. The priest nods, not in instruction, in acknowledgement. A soft breeze lifts the hem of your robe. A faint drum beat, slow, almost heart-like, echoes from somewhere far down the hill. But here, no one responds, because this is the part of time that waits to be seen, not rushed, not calculated, just quietly counted. A sky full of patient markers, a field where none of them are chased. The field behind you lies quiet now, scattered with tiny pebbles, like stars fallen softly to earth. You rise and follow a narrow path uphill, lined with small torches sunk deep into the soil. Their flames are low, barely taller than your ankle. They don't light the way. They mark respect for the dark. You're approaching a small, square structure no higher than your shoulders, made of tightly fitted stone. There's no door, just an open face. Inside a bench, a woven mat, and a painted symbol on the rear wall. This is not a shrine, it's a place of remembering. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Tonalpuk, the calendar keepers of Aztec society, held a distinct social and spiritual role. These priests were responsible for interpreting the sacred calendar, guiding rituals, and helping individuals understand their place in time. They consulted goddesses, studied the movement of celestial bodies, and listened more than spoke. Their work was quiet, deliberate, and revered. They weren't feared prophets or fiery leaders. They were keepers of days, of rhythm, of perspective. You sit now at the edge of the small room. Inside, an elder Tonalpuki kneels beside the painted wall, laying out small shells in a loose spiral. He is not performing. He is remembering. The shells click softly as he moves them into place. Then he stills his hand. Fringe detail, it said that some day keepers carried small pouches filled with symbolic objects, tiny maize kernels, feathers, beads, bones of birds. Each one represented a different day sign. When consulted for guidance, they would cast a handful onto a woven cloth and read their positions not for prediction, but for balance. The outcome wasn't what will happen, it was what harmonizes. The elder now opens a folded cloth, revealing a circle of dried marigold petals. He lifts a few and places them near the shell spiral, one for each name of the day, one for each silence between. Here's your scholarly uncertainty. How were these calendar interpretations understood by the broader public? Some evidence suggests common people consulted Tonalpuk before weddings, planting seasons, or naming children. Others propose their knowledge was reserved for elite priests. But what's clear is that their role required stillness. They did not chase meaning, they received it. This is your journey-style immersion. You're invited inside. No words, just a gesture. You sit beside the shells and marigolds. The elder places a thin reed between you and the wall, a quiet line marking space. You do not cross it. You do not need to. He points to one shell, then another. You have no idea what they mean, but something in their distance feels like rhythm, not message, not lesson, just shape. You breathe in slowly. You remain. The reed quivers once, catching a breeze you hadn't noticed. The shells don't move. The petals don't fade. The elder closes the cloth and returns it to its pouch. And for a moment, you understand time isn't something you wear, or fear, or lose. It's something you listen to. And tonight, it whispered. The sky has turned velvety now, so deep and dark that even the brightest stars seem softened at the edges. You step quietly down from the memory room, your sandals brushing gently against the path's worn stones. A dog trots past you without urgency, tail low, ears flicked forward, as if it too has somewhere slow to be. You're headed to a quiet chamber tucked near the back of the complex. There's no roof, just open sky above and inside. Resting on woven mats are several folded codices, not hidden, not locked, just waiting. Time here lives in pages, but never turns in haste. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Aztec codices that recorded calendar systems weren't books in the modern sense. They were sacred pictorial guides, folded accordion style and often made of deerskin or amate bark paper. These manuscripts were painted slowly by trained scribes and read even more slowly by priests or students of the calendar. Unlike scrolls meant to be read from start to end, codices were nonlinear, designed for circling back, skipping ahead, pausing, and returning. Time, on paper, was circular. You kneel beside one open codex. The surface smells of age, pigment, and distant fires. The pages are thick, slightly glossy from centuries of careful fingers. Each glyph is painted with care day signs, bordered in red, a serpent curling gently around a month's worth of symbols, a priest figure holding a staff shaped like a crescent moon. Fringe detail these books were not stored out of sight. In many temples and schools, codices were kept in low, visible racks meant to be seen, even when not read. One Spanish friar recorded that priests would speak softly to the pages before opening them, as if you're greeting an elder or asking permission to listen. You notice a set of 3 black dots painted at the bottom corner of one page, followed by a feather. It's not a date. It's a marker pause here. Here's your scholarly uncertainty where codices understood by many, or only a specialized few. Some argue they were accessible, recited aloud to listeners like storytelling scrolls. Others believe they were closely guarded, read only in ritual or instruction. Either way, they were never rushed. The act of reading was sacred. Sometimes a single page held enough meaning for an entire month's worth of guidance. This is your journey style immersion. You touch the edge of the codex. The page beneath your fingers yields slightly, as if bowing. You don't turn it. You just read what's already open. A single line of red glyphs traces across the panel like a vine. You follow it with your eyes, not needing to know the names, only the movement, a star, then a reed, then a curled shell. It feels like breath. Another priest sits nearby, his head bowed, his fingers tracing the same line at his own pace. You don't match him. You don't try to move ahead. You simply stay. The stars above wheel slowly in their arcs. A moth lands on the edge of the open page. The priest smiles, not at the moth, at the moment. Because here, even the smallest interruption can be a marker of time. The codex is still open. You're still reading, even if you never turn the page. The codex room rests behind you now, still open, still breathing. You step outside into cooler air. The stars seem lower now, not closer, exactly, but quieter, like they've stopped speaking in light and are simply keeping you company. The path leads toward a low platform surrounded by torches that haven't been lit in years. Their wooden bases are darkened with age, but still stand evenly spaced, circling a central stone disc. It isn't ornate. It isn't labeled. This is where time restarts, gently. Here's your mainstream historical fact every 52 years. The Aztec ritual calendar and the solar calendar would complete a full cycle together, a sacred interval known as the bundling of years. This moment was deeply significant. It marked the end of an era and the careful beginning of another. The ceremony that honored it was known as the New Fire Ceremony, and it wasn't celebratory in the festive sense. It was solemn, silent, reverent. The old fires were extinguished. The new fire lit atop a sacred hill. If all was done correctly, time would continue. You kneel beside the central stone. A faint spiral is carved into its surface, just deep enough to catch starlight. No words, no dates, just one turn, winding inward, fringe detail in the final hours before the new cycle began. Every fire across the city was put out. Households waited in darkness, no cooking, no warmth, just breath and stillness. And when the fire was lit again, carried carefully from mountaintop to temple to home, people wept not with relief, but with recognition. We are still here. You rest your palm on the spiral. It's cool, slightly rough. Someone has placed a small offering nearby, just a bundle of reeds tied with red thread. Nothing dramatic, just the suggestion that this day matters. Here's your scholarly uncertainty: what happened in the emotional space between the ending of one 52-year cycle and the start of the next. Some records describe fasting, others quiet singing, but many agree that it wasn't a time of fear. It was a sacred pause, a full stop in the sentence of centuries. The fire wasn't reignited in celebration. It was reignited in continuity. This is your journey-style immersion. You light no flame, but you remain seated at the edge of the disk. A priest passes by with a bowl of cooled ash from the previous ceremony. He scatters a pinch onto the spiral, then moves on. You do the same, not because you understand all that has ended, but because you honor all that may begin. The stars turn slightly. The wind lifts, light and dry. The stone remains, but beneath your fingers, it feels less cold now, as if memory has begun to warm it again. You rise slowly, and as you walk back toward the sleeping buildings and ink-stained codices, you understand something about the Aztec calendar that wasn't carved or painted. Time does not collapse. It folds, and when it unfolds again, you're still part of it. The sky is fully open now. No light from torches, no hum of voices, just you, the soft hush of stone under your feet, and 1,000 patient stars overhead, watching, steady, utterly unconcerned with speed. You return to the uppermost courtyard, where the air feels thinner, cooler, easier to breathe. The glyphs painted on the walls seem fainter in the dark, like they're resting too. You lie down, not dramatically, just as if the earth had offered you a place, and you said yes. The courtyard is still. Your body is too. You've walked the calendars, not with numbers or alarms, but with breath and step and slow regard. You've watched glyphs carved with care, stars placed like soft punctuation, pages unfolded, not to be conquered, but to be understood. And now, nothing is required. You've stepped outside of hours, outside of urgency. You've entered the part of time that doesn't ask for anything. You feel the stone beneath you, cool, balanced, ancient. It doesn't press, it holds. The air against your skin has weight, but no edge. There's a scent in the night maze, clay, a faint curl of pigment powder. Even the stars smell calm. A priest passes nearby. He doesn't speak, but he sees you and nods. Not because you've done anything worth praise, just because you stayed, because you were quiet long enough to hear the calendar turn, not with ticking, but with trust. You exhale, not to end the day, but to release the part of it you no longer need to hold. And as your breath slows, you remember the painted page, the one with the feather, the shell, the 3 black dots. Pause here, so you do. No rush, no expectation, just a soft settling into stillness. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your jaw rest. Let your mind remain open but quiet. The world turns, the stars slide gently forward, somewhere in a folded codex. Tomorrow has already arrived, but you don't need to read ahead. Tonight is the last page for now, and it's enough. You've entered the calendar's quiet. You've been counted. Now, you rest.